The first rays of sun slant through your eyelids, rousing you from sleep. You stretch, letting out a sleepy yawn before sitting up and looking around. In the distance, you can see the hazy outlines of other huts, forming a small village of reed and brick. On your back, you carry an empty water skin made from the hide of some unfortunate goat, along with your tools of the trade. You walk past a fellow water carrier, nodding in greeting, then continue on until you reach the riverbank. He sighs in frustration, knowing that without it, he won't be able to make the trip back to town. The fish your wife caught last night will probably be dried by now, so you can take it to the market to trade for grain. If business is good, you may even be able to afford some dates or figs. The thought of sweet figs makes your mouth water. You hope the grain lasts until the next harvest. As you approach the village, you see the baker pulling fresh loaves out of his oven, their golden tops glistening in the sun. The smell makes your stomach rumble. You really need to hurry up and get home before your own meal is ready. You find your wife in the courtyard, washing clothes. She looks up and smiles when she sees you, then goes back to work. You take off your water skin and lean heavily on your staff, glad to be done for the day. You tuck a stray blanket around them and kiss your wife on the cheek. She snuggles closer to you and you fall asleep thinking about tomorrow, about the endless cycle of work and family and community that will fill your days. You aren't sure what the future holds, but as long as you have your family and the strength in your arms, you know you will be fine. Your children come running out of the fields, their faces flushed from the sun. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more historical tales. Also check out our other videos, which are just waiting for you to click on them. They drop to their knees and start helping with the chores, and you watch them, a surge of pride in your heart. You take one last swig of water, then turn and head for home. The fish from last night is split open and seasoned with herbs and vegetables from the market sizzle alongside chunks of goat. Someone brings out a harp and begins playing a song of Gilgamesh, the mighty king who tamed the wild man in Kidu and defeated the monstrous Humbaba. Another picks up a small flute and joins in, harmonizing with the harp. The songs go on late into the night, and by the time the moon climbs high in the sky, everyone has gone home. The bread is still warm from the oven, and your daughter brings out bowls of fruit for dessert. As you eat, you tell stories of your adventures on the road, keeping your voice low when you speak of the water carrier. You helped earlier in the dream you had last night. Theirs is a hard life here in Mesopotamia, even when the gods smile upon them. At each house, you exchange pleasantries with the family, perhaps trading gossip or jokes. Children run up to you, splashing in puddles and begging for a drink. You indulge them, making funny faces and ruffling their hair. But soon, it's time to move on. Seeing his plight, you stop and offer to help, and together you manage to fix the cart. The spring rains came and the rivers rose, swelling the canals and bringing new life to the fields. But they didn't come in too strong, didn't wash away the soil and leave the fields barren for months. For that, you and everyone else owe a debt to the goddess Nintunaga, the wet nurse of the gods, who brought order to the chaos of the early world. She taught humans how to plant crops and care for animals, how to make bricks and build houses. Thanks to her, life wasn't as hard as it was for your ancestors, wandering the wilderness as nomads, always moving, never settling down. He thanks you and asks how you are, and you reply truthfully, by the grace of Enki. Well, no, also Enki, the Lord of Wisdom, the patron deity of the water carriers and all those who work with water. They pray to him before setting out each morning, asking for safe passage and enough water to slake the thirst of their fields. And sometimes, just sometimes, they receive answers, either in the gentle lapping of water on the bank or the sudden appearance of a previously unknown spring. You wish you could tell him about the dream you had last night about being visited by the god himself, the god of wisdom and water, and how he told you that you would one day be a great leader uniting all the water carriers under one banner. But you fear that if you spoke of such things, people would think you'd finally lost your mind. You feel the soft mud squish between your toes and bring your water skin down to dip it in the water. Taking a long drink yourself, you begin filling your skin, humming a wordless tune. Beyond that, the flat, featureless Mesopotamian plain stretches to the horizon. To the north, you know lies the great city of Ur, where the mighty king Gilgamesh once ruled. But that feels very far away. Here, in this small village along the banks of a canal connecting the Euphrates River to the Persian Gulf. Your concerns are much smaller. You are a water carrier, one of many who ply their trade along these waterways. Your work is vital, bringing water from the river to those who live too far away from its banks to access it themselves. Without people like you, the fields would wither and die, and the people would starve. Your small hut is built from dried mud bricks, hardened by the sun. A thatched roof keeps the worst of the heat out during the day and the surprisingly chilly desert nights at bay. The sun climbs higher in the sky, beating down on your neck and back. You wipe the sweat from your brow with a scrap of cloth tied around your head. The village is still a good ways off, but you know you must press on. As you walk, you pass a field where men and women are bending over plants, coaxing life from the stubborn soil. Some of them look up and call out to you, hoping you might have a spare moment to help with the planting, but you shake your head. You don't have time to spare. The walls are adorned with simple paintings, likely done by your daughter, when she wasn't too busy helping out around the house. Her, along with your son, are probably already up, helping prepare for the day. You get up and join them outside the hut. The morning air is fresh and cool. After seeing your children off to the fields and your wife tending to livestock, you set out towards the river. When it's full, you lift the heavy load onto your shoulders and start back towards town. Up ahead, you see another water carrier struggling with a broken handcart. As you continue walking, you think about what you will do when you return home. At least the flooding this year hasn't been too bad. But it's not just Nintenuga they have to thank. For now, though, you have no audience with the gods. You have work to do. Over the course of the day, you complete your rounds, delivering water to those who need it. Finally, as the sun begins its slow slide toward the horizon, you return home. Soon, the family is gathered around a small fire pit cooking dinner. After dinner, you gather with your neighbors around a fire, sharing stories and jokes, catching up on the gossip. You and your wife lie on a mat in the corner, watching your children sleep. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed our journey to ancient Mesopotamia, the world's first civilization, arose from the flat, sun-baked plains between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Here, where the cradle of humanity had met the cradle of civilization, is where we begin our journey. Today, we are answering the question, why wouldn't you last a day in ancient Mesopotamia? The sun has not yet broken over the flat horizon, but the city is already stirring. Your Uruk, Lagash, Kish, Eridu, one of many cities dotting the landscape, each ruled by a powerful monarch, each connected by the king's roads. As you reach the fields, you see your family already working. The city boasted impressive buildings, grand temples, and ziggurats rising up from the flat landscape. The royal palace, bustling marketplaces, and the houses of the wealthy were decorated with bright paintings and sculptures, depicting scenes from mythology and daily life. Not everyone was poor. Slaves worked the fields, cleaned houses, and performed menial tasks. Merchants thrived, trading goods both within the empire and with distant lands. Kings grew rich on tributes from their subjects, and the occasional gift of elephant tusks or gold bars from a friendly foreign ruler. Scribe priests maintained order through their hymns and incantations, supposedly receiving divine guidance as they wrote down laws, prophesies, and myths. The bards told epic tales of Gilgamesh and Enkidu, their voices echoing across the millennia. Across the empire, soldiers defended its borders and went on campaign, bringing back exotic goods and new tales of faraway lands. But even with all of these, the majority of people living in ancient Mesopotamia were farmers and laborers. The entire economy was built upon their backs. The concept of an afterlife gave many hope. Rulers were mummified, their bodies preserved in a tomb filled with riches. The dead were buried beneath the floors of houses and sometimes sacrificed to ensure the safety of their family and community. Despite these customs, however, the majority of people were cremated or laid to rest in unmarked graves. They were ordinary folk, ordinary people whose names and stories were lost to time. You pull on a hat to shield your face from the sun. It was the grind of living. It's the rhythm of dust, sweat, and survival. Once the crops are planted, you help irrigate the field, clearing the irrigation ditches of weeds. A single misstep could cause flooding, washing away weeks of work. Or the opposite could happen. A bit of weed in the wrong place could lead to a breach in the banks, causing a drought and famine. Back home, Your mother is already hard at work. She is teaching one of your siblings how to spin wool. Another's learning to sew. You're nodding greeting to a neighbor tending her own garden. Lentils, onions, dates, herbs, whatever can grow in the sun-baked soil is planted and replanted. If you are lucky, your garden thrives. If you are unlucky, everything wilts and dies. Always there is the threat of locusts and other pests devouring what little you have managed to raise. Midday arrives with a wall of heat. There is little escape. If you're lucky, a bit of shade under a goat hide awning and a cup of cool date beer, sour and slightly fermented. If you're unlucky, more orders from the temple officials, who demand 1/10 of your grain, always more grain. When your father returns from the city, you ask about the scribes, the ones who come to collect taxes. Your father frowns. He paid them today, but soon they will return with clay tablets for you to sign. Always more grain. Always more clay tablets to count and measure. You lie on a woven mat inside a one-room house of sun-dried brick. A priest passes by with an incense pot. You bow your head. Behind him, a scribe with a wooden tablet and stylus' symbols record taxes you do not understand. Owed in bushels, labor, or sheep, the evening brings a breeze, finally. Children play with carved animal figurines in the dust, kicking up clouds of dirt around them. You eat a simple stew, onions, lentils, a few herbs if they've survived the heat. The sky is vast and clear, filled with the brightest stars imaginable. In the darkness, you say a prayer to Ishtar for protection, perhaps Ninhursag, if someone is ill. There are many gods, many fears. At night, you lie awake listening to dogs bark and the croak of frogs in the canals. The city hums. The stars above you are the same stars seen by kings and commoners alike. But you, retired, your hands are cracked, your back aches. And tomorrow, the city will wake before you do. The air is thick, still heavy with the night's heat. There is no glass in the windows, on the windows only wooden shutters, propped open to catch whatever breeze may wander in. Your father stirs outside, talking in hushed tones with the men of the household. As you rise, they are ready to leave, to join the growing throng of humanity streaming toward the city gates. With a quick nod, they are gone, swallowed by the tide. You dress quickly, pulling a rough tunic over your head and tying the belt at your waist. There is no time to spare. You join the others. No need for complex clothing here. The weather is nearly always too hot for anything more than a linen loincloth or a light cotton dress. The streets are narrow and crooked, packed with homes that lean into one another like companions sharing gossip. Brick gives way to mud brick, which gives way to wattle and daub. The wealthiest homes might boast white stucco walls and a tile roof, but even these cannot shield their inhabitants from the sounds of the city. There is no privacy, no silence. Welcome to Life Noggin. In this series, we explore how ancient people lived through reenactments, archaeological evidence, and historical records. The routine is well practiced. Water must be fetched before the day grows hot, so you stand patiently in line at the public bathhouse. Here, the water is warm, perhaps shared with other bathers. Maybe there is oil for scraping, and a barber is available for shaving. Or maybe, if you have coin, you can rent a private bath. But today, there is none of those luxuries. So you wash yourself with cold water, saving the warm water for scrubbing and rinsing. From there, you head to the marketplace, dodging vendors and their wares, each calling out their goods. Baskets piled high with fish and loaves of bread. Merchants hawking textiles and leather goods, silversmiths showing off finely wrought jewelry, perfume makers touting unguents made with myrrh and cinnamon. The air buzzes with activity. People, animals, vendors, dogs, cats, goats, donkeys, all crowded together in a cacophony of sights, smells, and sounds. A group of musicians plays a lively tune on reed pipes. Acrobat entertains a crowd of children and an old. Man tells stories while a monkey sits on his shoulder. Over it all, the stench of livestock and sewage hangs like a bad dream. The river runs through the city center, fed by canals dug by hand and maintained by the state. Though artificial, these waterways make farming possible and bring fresh water from the source. Now, with the city growing ever larger, keeping them clean and clear becomes a monumental task. Often the water is cloudy, tasting faintly of mud and reeds. Still, it's better than nothing. You carry it back, every step, a quiet strain. To live in Mesopotamia meant living with constant vigilance, not just against invaders, but against the elements. against the slow creep of the desert, and against the whims of the gods. You empty your jugs and then fill them again, ladling water into them from a large clay vessel. Some days the supply is low, so you must carry more. On such days, any extra water you can find must be rationed. Carefully you head home, walking light on your feet, so as not to draw attention to the sound of sloshing water. You dodge between pedestrians and wagons on your way to the river. The sun climbs higher, promising a sweltering day. Your family's modest plot of land lies just outside the city's walls. Later, you might repair the roof cracked again from sun and time war, patch up your tunic with rough thread. To be sure, life in Mesopotamia was not without its perks, and that, perhaps, is why most wouldn't last a single day. It was not the glory that kept Mesopotamia alive. It was repetition. Thank you for watching. Hit the like button if you learned something new today. And don't forget to subscribe. When you think of emperors and empires, the same names come to mind. Rome, Genghis Khan, Augustus, Alexander the Great. These are well-known stories. Sargon of Akkad is not. And yet, in many ways, he deserves to be remembered alongside those giants. See, Sargon was the world's first emperor. Sargon's story starts in Mesopotamia, specifically the city of Kish. Now, it's hard to say exactly when Sargon lived, because nobody knows for sure. Historians say he reigned sometime between 2334 and 2279 BCE, which puts him somewhere around 4,000 years ago. They praise Sargon's military victories and cast him as a godlike hero. Before Sargon, kings held power with the support of local elites. And to maintain loyalty, they relied on personal relationships, blood ties, patron-client networks, and religious bonds. Early historians wrote that he was the son of a priestess, which was scandalous enough, but later scribes claimed that he was born from a divine lineage. Over time, he became associated with the gods and the hymns started pouring out. Was he a tyrant? Who are the greatest people you've never heard of? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Well, there is some evidence to suggest that he ruthlessly crushed rebellions, but we don't know much about his personality or how he governed. Subscribe and join us next time as we continue to answer the great questions of history. Perhaps surprisingly, though, his empire didn't collapse due to external forces, but internal ones. As the Akkadians expanded, their infrastructure, society, and economy became too much to sustain. Provinces revolted. The governors could unpay their troops, and eventually the empire dissolved into the chaos that Sargon had worked so hard to tame. In the end, the Akkadian Empire lasted less than a century. But the idea outlived it. Other kingdoms copied Sargon's model, and the very concept of empire continued to evolve for millennia. Power flowed outward from the king. There was little standardization and almost no institutions to help run the state. Everything depended on the people in charge. Sargon changed that. When he took the throne of Akkad, he implemented sweeping reforms. He reorganized trade, reformed agriculture, standardized weights and measures, and established a new legal code. But perhaps his greatest achievement was building a professional bureaucracy. This meant replacing personal loyalty with institutional authority. Officials were appointed based on merit rather than connection. And to keep them in check, he created a complex system of checks and balances. The governors of each province could collect taxes, draft soldiers, and oversee construction projects. But they had to follow the laws outlined by Sargon. Listen to this excerpt from an Akkadian hymn. He is the bull which bellows terrible among men, which nothing can stop, which tramples down mountains and fills the whole world with the sound of its bellowing. Yeah, this guy didn't call himself Emperor Sargon, the Conqueror, for nothing. But while poems paint a picture of Sargon's achievements, his true legacy lies in the politics. His rise to power, the consolidation of authority, and the establishment of bureaucracy were unprecedented. That's a really long time. And the lack of exact dates reflects the hazy nature of early Mesopotamian history. Clay tablets tell part of the story, yes, but they only contain what the ruling elite wanted recorded. Kings who came before him had dreamed of empire, but Sargon actually achieved one. He did it by taming an unruly region and laying the groundwork for centuries of imperial rule. His successors would expand and contract the empire, but the overall structure remained remarkably stable. The stability allowed cultural exchange to flourish within the empire. Ideas, religions, and technology spread quickly from one end to the other. Cities that once competed now traded and intermarried. The whole region was tied together through the efforts of a single monarch. For all intents and purposes, the era of empires had begun. Family trees etched in stone might add a few more names, but these lists often contradict each other. The result is a record incomplete enough to leave large gaps in our understanding. We have to piece together what we know from archaeology, comparing written accounts to unearthed artifacts and ruins. Even still, it is a remarkable feat to put together any narrative at all from the dust of the ancient world. And for our purposes, the general outlines are good enough. His realm, known as the Akkadian Empire, is widely considered the first of its kind. It gets its name from the resurgence of Babylonian culture, after earlier Mesopotamian states collapsed, and during this time, Sumerian, Akkadian, and Babylonian were all spoken throughout the region. However, the political landscape was fragmented. City-states were ruled by kings who maintained control through patronage, conquest, or marriage. Trade flourished, yes, but so did warfare. It was a world of shifting alliances and constant competition until Sargon came along. His empire was the first to truly centralize power in one ruler. Now, this title comes with a lot of weight. Sargon is often compared to other early conquerors like Naram-Sin of Akkad and the Third Dynasty of Ur. But it was Sargon who united northern and southern Mesopotamia in a single administrative unit. The capital was Akkad, but the empire stretched to the Persian Gulf and beyond. The borders of empires are difficult things. They shift, overlap, ignore natural boundaries, and change over time. But if you drew one for Sargon's domain, it would encompass much of modern Iraq, Kuwait, and parts of Syria and Turkey. To put it another way, if Sargon controlled the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, he would be the king of everything east of the Mediterranean Sea, except Egypt. So let me start at the beginning. Let us step now from the narrow, sun-baked alleys of common life to the echoes of empire. You are standing in a royal courtyard and open plaza, surrounded by tall mud brick walls, swept daily by servants and shaded by canopies of woven reeds. In the center, a man stands taller than most. His gaze is steady. His robes are plain for a king, but his bearing is unmistakable. This is Sargon of Akkad, and you are witnessing the dawn of the world's first empire. But Sargon, like all men, began without a crown. He was not born to nobility. According to legend told in soft, uncertain tones by generations of scribes, he was the child of a priestess, conceived in secrecy and cast adrift in a woven basket upon the river. Rescued by a gardener, he grew up tending orchards, learning discipline with his hands before mastering power with his mind. As a young man, Sargon served as cupbearer to a king of Kisha trusted position. Yes, but humble. Yet even in silence, he observed, he listened to court intrigue, learned the art of leadership, and waited for his moment. And then he moved. Through battle, charisma, and calculation, he seized the city of Akkota, city lost to us now, buried somewhere under the dust of Arakand. From there, built something the world had never seen, a centralized empire stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. He did not rule with gold or poetry. He ruled with order. Roads were built. Weights and measures standardized. He appointed his daughters as priestesses in conquered cities in act, both spiritual and deeply political. And with the power of his army and his word, he unified a region long divided by language, tribe, and tradition. But empires like clay tablets left in the rain do not last forever. Sargon's successors struggled to hold together what he had forged. Revolts simmered beneath the surface. Crops failed. The land overtaxed and overextended began to whisper back its resentment. Eventually, the Akkadian Empire collapsed. The exact reasons, climate shifts, rebellions, exhaustion are still studied. But in time, the cities fell silent. The inscriptions praising Sargon faded. His empire dissolved into memory. And yet, his legacy endured. The very idea of empire, a man ruling not just a city, but lands beyond sight, was born here, with Sargon. Later kings would invoke his name, copy his titles, and dream of his reach. And perhaps, when you look into the quiet distance of history, you can still hear the rhythm of his footsteps across the baked earth of Akkad. Alright, so that was a little dramatic. Let's talk about how Sargon got from humble beginnings to creating the first empire. Sargon ruled during the late 3rd millennium BCE, a period sometimes called the Old Babylonian period. He wasn't the first to try. Earlier monarchs held sway over larger territories, but none had forged such deep and lasting political connections between disparate regions. As for how he did it, there's the poetry and there's the politics. The poems focus on the former. To understand his accomplishments, you have to understand his predecessors. In practice, this meant a powerful state apparatus capable of exercising centralized control over a vast territory. Now, as for Sargon himself, the longer he was gone, the more mythical he became. So yeah, while Sargon of Akkad might not be a household name, his impact on history was enormous. He was the blueprint for emperors to come. That's why he's one of the 100 greatest. I'm here to tell you about an enigma. It's a mystery that doesn't involve tombs or treasures, lost cities, or secret societies. Tonight, our enigma sleeps in museums and university libraries. It whispers in dead languages from clay bricks. I'll show you where to find it. This is Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, where history began. But though you might know its monuments, ziggurats and steps, palaces and hanging gardens, it was the small things that made civilization possible. Only in the early 1800s did scholars realize they held the keys to history. Why? Because translating cuneiform is an extraordinary challenge. Take the script itself. The only way to solve it is to read the tablets. It might seem impossible, but people are working on it. Now you woe, and be surprised to hear that the British Museum has one of the finest collections of cuneiform tablets. On a given day, you can see hundreds of them on display. But what happens to the ones that don't make the cut? Deep in the museum basement is the cuneiform room. Here, in dimmed lights, sit thousands of tablets stored in steel cabinets. You can walk among them, but there are so many, you can easily miss something special. Such as this tiny fragment, the first page of a lost epic poem. Scholars believe it tells the story of Gilgamesh, a legendary Mesopotamian king. But here's the catch. This tablet was only identified as part of an epic poem in 1993. It spent more than 3,000 years hidden in plain sight. Other tablets contain stories of gods and monsters, star maps and curses, tax records, and love poetry. They are chronicles of daily life, not epics. But for anyone trying to solve our enigma, that's a great thing. It shows that even in obscurity, there are clues to discovery. Cuneiform started out pictographic, showing a bird and a fish, and a man with a net. Imagine a researcher sitting at her desk, looking at a faded clay tablet. Ask your local library or museum if they have any cuneiform tablets on display or in storage. Spend some time looking at them, and even try to read them for yourself. And while you do, keep this in mind. You're holding something precious. Those clay tablets are older than the pyramids of Giza. They were crafted by hands long turned to dust. Each one is a window onto a world that's gone. So if you ever stand in front of a cuneiform tablet, remember this moment. Remember the quiet dignity of the clay, the precision of the script, and the fact that it took thousands of years to bring you and this enigma together. She can use a special camera to capture higher resolution images of both sides. Then, she takes that image and runs it through a program that scans it line by line. Finally, she can take that data and compare it with other tablets, looking for patterns and matches. Slowly but surely, new ways of reading cuneiform are being developed. And our hope is that one day soon, more and more tablets will be unlocked. But as it evolved, it became much more abstract, like the Egyptian hieroglyph for king, which looks nothing like the pharaoh it represented. At its most complex, cuneiform had some 6,000 signs. That's 3 times more than Chinese characters. And each one could have multiple meanings depending on the context. The second problem is the languages themselves. Cuneiform wasn't just a writing system, it was multilingual. And the languages contained within it often don't have direct translations. Sumerian, for example, died out around 1800 BC. That's 3,000 years before Shakespeare. Many words in Sumerian have no echo in English. The same is true of Akkadian, Babylonian, and the rest. And that's not all. Cuneiform documents come from thousands of places and span thousands of years. Let's imagine again, you're in a quiet museum basement. The shelves stretch high above you, each one lined with grayish clay tablets the size of your hand. Some are broken, others are wrapped carefully in archival linen. All of them whisper in a language few can speak. Tablets cover every aspect of life contracts, hymns, medicine, mathematics, omens, tax records, and even literature. Some tell of star charts and eclipses. Others catalog beer rations for temple workers. There are complaints, confessions, and curses. One such tablet, over 4,000 years old, contains what is now called the world's oldest customer service complaint. A merchant frustrated with a shipment of poor quality copper. But for every translated tablet, there are many more whose messages remain locked away. Why? Because cuneiform evolved over thousands of years across several languages: Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian. Even those who specialize in it must learn not just the characters, but the context, the region, the time period, and there is simply too much. At the British Museum, for example, nearly 130,000 cuneiform tablets are in storage. Most have never been translated. They sit in drawers in climate-controlled rooms, waiting quiet and patient as they have for millennia. The first decipherer was a British scholar named Henry Rawlinson. He was traveling in northern Iran in 1835 when he discovered the Behistun inscription, a 500-foot-long rock carved with the deeds of the Achaemenid king Darius. Darius claimed his empire stretched from the Caucasus mountains to the Arabian Sea, and inscribed next to his boasts were versions of the king's message in 3 different scripts. 2 of these were complete mysteries, but the third was Old Persian, a language that scholars had recently deciphered. Working backwards from the Old Persian text, Rawlinson managed to read the 2 others, Elamite and Babylonian. And then, in 1847, he announced his greatest achievement: reading cuneiform, the script of ancient Mesopotamia. Today, thanks to men like Rawlinson, there are entire libraries of translated cuneiform tablets online. You can spend hours searching for your favorite subjects. Birth records, marriage contracts, even recipes are at your fingertips. We tend to think of writing as magical, mysterious, but in Mesopotamia, it was practical, important, normal. Every morning, a scribe would dip his quill into ink, open a fresh clay tablet, and record the sunrise. Then he would write down all the day's events, pronouncements, market prices, births, deaths, anything worth remembering. And at sunset, he would bake his tablets, hardening them forever in the hot sun. These clay bricks were more than records. They were memory, collective memory. And so today, when archaeologists unearth them, they can reveal to us a way of life that was intimate, ordinary, dare so obeyed. But to solve it, you'll need patience, a curious mind, and maybe a flashlight. Are you ready? If you are, let's begin. Here is how we might start our story. A vast empire stretches from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, Tigris and Euphrates rivers running like arteries through its heart. Now, I want to introduce you to an enigma. It's a mystery that doesn't involve tombs or treasures, lost cities or secret societies. Our enigma slept in museums and university libraries. It whispered in dead languages from clay bricks. So let's ask the obvious. What exactly is this enigma? Well, if you've already guessed it, well done. If not, let me introduce you to cuneiform. The word means wedge-shaped, referring to the shape of its letters. When a scribe wrote, he would press a reed stylus into soft, wet clay. Wedge by wedge, he would form symbols, first simple, then complex, and eventually whole words. As you can imagine, such a system was open to interpretation. Letters could look different depending on who was writing them, in this case a little like the handwriting of your teenager. And the same symbol could represent different ideas too. For example, this sign could mean either a head or a bull. So the context had to be clear. Over thousands of years, the script was used by dozens of cultures, empires, and languages: Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Syrian, Hittite, Hurrian, Eurasian, and the list goes on. The problem is that all this variety makes deciphering a challenge. Writing systems are unique achievements. They are the key to understanding any society. But cuneiform is particularly tricky because it evolves so much over time. The Sumerians created their script around 2800 BC. The Assyrians were still writing in cuneiform 2,000 years later. That's longer than from the invention of hieroglyphs to Shakespeare. For hundreds of years, most cuneiform tablets were dismissed as rubble, found beneath fallen buildings or mixed with common clay. But here's where our mystery deepens. While hundreds of thousands of tablets have been found, less than half of them have been translated. So let's go back to our question. What exactly is this enigma? Well, it's quite simple. It's this. The truth is in the library. In recent decades, scholars have turned to technology to help them solve our enigma. Here is how you can play a part in solving our enigma. The city of Babylon is one of the most famous cities in history. But what was daily life really like there? Let's find out. Hey there, welcome to my channel. Today we are back in ancient Mesopotamia to explore life in the great city of Babylon. If you want to learn about ancient history through immersive experiences that let you play the role of people who lived in antiquity, make sure to check them out. Thanks to their support, we can keep bringing free educational videos to everyone. Long hours of work under the blazing sun, the constant threat of injury, and a close relationship with the natural world. Persian rugs are piled beside Syrian wine, and Mycenaean pottery sits next to Egyptian scarabs. Babylonian merchants would deal in luxury goods such as perfume and gold jewelry, while merchants from Anatolia might offer textiles and metalwork. He was the supreme judge, the final arbiter of legal disputes. From the humble laborer to the powerful priest, from the merchant hawking his wares to the king issuing laws, daily life in Babylon was a tapestry of responsibilities, hopes, and dreams. It wasn't just about kings and palaces, but also about the everyday lives of ordinary people. Whether for a laborer, merchant, priest, or king, was filled with responsibilities, challenges, and opportunities. The city's strategic location and economic prosperity made it a hub of activity. Daily life was a mix of hard work, religious devotion, and political intrigue. For the common people, it was about working the land, trading goods, or providing services. For the elites, it was about maintaining order, appeasing the gods, and ensuring the kingdom's prosperity. The king's favor was crucial, but so was the goodwill of the priests, whose interpretations of omens and rituals were integral to the kingdom's stability. Ancient Babylon was a melting pot of cultures due to its position as a major trading center. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our community. Special thanks again to my supporters whose support makes it possible for us to bring free educational videos to everyone. Thanks for watching. This led to a vibrant marketplace with goods from all over the ancient world. Religion played a central role in daily life, with priests having significant influence in both religious and political matters. The king was not only a political leader, but also a religious figurehead, expected to maintain the city's prosperity and security. And like any good tapestry, it was created stitch by painstaking stitch, generation after generation. He maintained the army and conducted foreign policy. Most importantly, he ensured the city's prosperity. Each king brought his own priorities to the throne. Some focused on building projects like the aforementioned Ishtar Gate or the Hanging Gardens. Others sponsored military campaigns or expanded trade routes. All knew that their legacy depended on their ability to bring peace and prosperity to the empire. To do this, they relied on the advice of the royal court. A king would surround himself with experienced administrators and scholars, men who understood the intricacies of governing a complex empire. There might be no consensus on everything, but together, the king and his court attempted to balance competing interests, quell rebellions, mediate trade disputes, and maintain security. And who could resist the charms of an Uzbek slave, or the wiles of an Armenian concubine? There are also practical goods for sale: food, tools, furniture, clothes, and woven through all of it, the lingua franca of Mesopotamian trade: silver. Silver, like grain and textiles, is a universal commodity. Its value is known far and wide. So as you haggle over a bronze mirror or a woolen cloak, you know its worth, and it is worth something. Unlike paper money, which can be counterfeited, a silver coin has intrinsic value. You can melt it down and prove its weight and purity. As you walk home with your purchases, the heat of the day gives way to evening, and the sounds of hammers on anvils fade to the calls of street vendors. You pass an outdoor kitchen where a family prepares dinner over an open fire. Soon you will sit with your family, sharing stories and news from the marketplace, eating dinner made of lentils, onions, garlic, and fish from the Euphrates River. Afterwards, the men of the family might play a game of board games, while the women sort through the day's earnings and prepare for the next day's work. Your days might take you to the famed Hanging Gardens, said to have been built by King Nebuchadnezzar II in honor of his homesick wife. Here, priests conduct rituals and sacrifices before gods like Marduk, the patron deity of Babylon. To them, daily life was a series of rituals, a cycle of prayers, offerings, and readings of entrails or the stars. Everything was potentially an omen. Every sunrise, every sneeze, every twitch of an animal's heart during sacrifice. Even the clouds were scrutinized for signs from the gods. The priests had little contact with the common folk. They lived separate lives of service and scholarship. Some were judges who interpreted law and delivered justice. Others were astronomers who recorded the movements of the heavens. Many were record keepers, carefully logging the receipts and disbursements of temple property. Since temples often owned vast stretches of farmland, shepherds, herdsmen, and overseers reported to them and paid them rent. With this steady income, the temples functioned like banks, often lending money at interest to farmers, artisans, and kings. It was a lot of responsibility and a lot of paperwork. Whether or not such exotic flora actually grew in this arid land is less important than the fact that this story made Babylon famous throughout the ancient world. Your labor could also take you to the Ishtar Gate, a massive structure adorned with glazed bricks and sculptures of fantastic creatures. Or to the Processional Way, a wide road lined with palm trees, which led to the entrance of the city. As you work, your body grows tired and you dream of cooler tasks and greater comforts. Perhaps one day you'll become an artisan. Your fingers will create instead of your brawn, or maybe a scribe. Your stylus will dance across the clay tablet instead of your muscles. You imagine a desk instead of a plow and fresh dates instead of stale bread. But for now, you wipe the sweat from your brow and return to the rhythm of the day. Now let's go back in time to ancient Babylon. During our previous explorations of Mesopotamian history, we discovered that the region we call the Fertile Crescent was one of the cradles of civilization. In the region we today call Iraq, we found the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Assyrians, and the Babylonians. We followed the ebb and flow of empires across the landscape, learning about the codes of Hammurabi and the rise of cuneiform writing. But now we turn our attention to the Babylonians and their capital, the grand city of Babylon. We'll begin with the common folk. Life as a day laborer in Babylon would have been much like it was anywhere else in Mesopotamia. Now let's visit the market. Here merchants from across the Near East display their wares. Now let's head to the temple, the center of civic life. Lastly, we end up at the royal court, where the king presides over advisors, courtiers, and diplomats. The king's duties were many and serious. So you can see, ancient Babylon was a hub of commerce, culture, and religion. So what did we learn today? Well, life in ancient Babylon was complex and varied, just like any other ancient society. Daily life in Babylon, all right?